As we said previously, if there's no fact of prophecy, there's no Torah. God is heavenly. The Torah is already going to be brought down to earth, to a nation, with practical applications. How will it be brought down? In prophecy. What did the nation not yet consolidate an idea of belief? That there's prophecy. They never experienced it. Who experienced it? Moshe. His brother and his sister Miriam in this generation. But the rest have not. And Moshe claims that God speaks with him. So we explained here in chapter 19 in verse 9 that God's initial plan, as if to say initial plan is what? That he only speak to Moshe and that the word get out through a vehicle to the nation. But the nation is not satisfied with that. Why? Look and let's prove what the nation is saying that appears after the Ten Commandments. I'm sorry. No. 1 second. The nation is saying, as brought down in the Midrash and the Mechilta, that we want to hear it from you directly. And you know what? There's a big advantage to that. That each and every one will hear directly and not through a shaliach. That means the faith of Israel will reach a new level. That everyone will hear directly God speaking. Which we said until now, they believe that Moshe is the shaliach, but maybe Moshe is wise. He's a wizard. He has spiritual powers, and maybe because of that, he knows what God is saying. But not that God speaks to Moshe as a prophet. Therefore, we can now say that the ultimate objective of this stand at Mount Sinai is to bring the faith of Israel to a new sphere, a new level, that there is prophecy. And that will mean V'gam b'cha yaminu l'olam. And even in Moshe, they'll believe that he's a prophet. V'gam, to include for all generations afterwards, that there are prophets. And therefore, there's now an answer to the request. The nation is asking for prophecy. What happens when they get it? And therefore, I brought your attention again to chapter 20. Look it up again. Chapter 20, verse 15. And this will relate to what your question is about people dying there. Verse 15 of chapter 20. Vayomru el Moshe. Daber ata imanu. Hey, this is enough. You tell us the rest. You tell us the 10 Commandments. V'nishman will hear it. Vayidaber imanu Elokim. We can't hear or continue listening to God. Why? Pen namut. According to the Midrash on this pasuk, people were indeed passing out. People were imbued with such fear that as if their soul was leaving their body. In other words, after the nation said, we want to hear directly from God, and we want to become prophets, we turn to the section after the giving of the 10 Commandments, and what do we see? That after God accepted the request of the nation, okay, and they heard it, 2 different opinions. Did they hear 2? Says Rabbi Yehuda Levi in the Kuzari. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God your Lord. Lo yelecha Elohim achirim. And the second one, you shall not have other gods. That's one approach. The other approach, which is in Chazal, we heard all 10. And after hearing that, we simply began to pass out. We began to pass out. And that explains why they're telling Moshe in verse 15, we had enough. You hear the rest. You hear the rest, we had enough. So what are we learning from here? That the Torah tells us pre-10 Commandments, in the first, what we saw before the 10 Commandments, the request of the nation, that they don't want to be a vehicle, they want to hear directly. And God allows them to hear it. That means all the nation, men, women, and children were prophets. This goes without saying, as we read in this section, they all went through days of preparation, physical preparation, washing their clothing, bathing in a mikveh perhaps, separating men from women, begin to thinking about holy concepts. There was a lot of preparation here, these 6 days prior to the showdown on top of Sinai. But it's clear to us that after the 10 Commandments, they said, we had enough. You hear the rest, and you tell us. It's whether they heard 2 or 10, and they're going berserk, and they can't tolerate that. And now, the question is, what has the nation ascertained? And now, please look together with me in verse 16 of chapter 20. Vayomer Moshe la'am al tiro. Don't be fearful. Ki levav. What's that? 17. Okay. Thank you. Some of yours from verse 17. Al tiro. Don't be afraid. Ki levavor nasot etchem. God was testing you. By Elokim. Uvavor tia yirato, so that you have fear on your faces. Levilti techetau. My dear friends, this message that the nation wanted to hear more but could not accept it is in the speech of Moshe Rabbeinu. What's the name of that Chumash? Where Moshe is a collection of speeches of Moshe Rabbeinu. Where is it? Which Chumash is that? Dvarim. So for those that have a full Chumash, in chapter 5 of Dvarim, you're welcome to open up. In chapter 5, if you don't, you can look at your neighbor. Say perhaps chapter 5 of Dvarim. Chapter 5, verse 19. I'm reading. Vayihi kishomachem et hakol. When you heard the voice, mitoch hachoshech, out of darkness, v'har boer beish, and the mountain is burning with fire. V'tikruvun elai kol rashei shiftechem. Your leaders, ziknechem, your elders, you came to me. What did you tell me? Verse 20. V'tomru, and you said, Hein heranu Hashem Elokeinu et kvodo v'et godlo. God has shown us His great glory and His great honor. V'et kolo shamanu, we heard His voice. Mitoch ha'esh, from the fire. Hayom hazeh, today. Ra'inu, we saw. What was their doubt? Does God speak to man? Listen to the next words. Ra'inu ki yidaber Elokim et adam. We saw that God speaks to man. V'chayim, we can still live. But we don't feel that we're going to still live. I'm adding verse 21. Ve'ata, now, lama namut.
Also here, we're one verse ahead.
Okay, verse 21. Okay. Ve'ata, and now, lama namut, why shall we die? This is after the 10 Commandments in the book of Torah. What, He gave it to us twice? The 10 Commandments? You saw the movie, was it given twice or what? So just repeat it now in the book of repetition, the book of Dvarim. Why should we die? Ki tochlenu eish ha'gedolah. The fire is going to devour us. If we hear further God speaking, we're going to die. Moshe, kravata, you go close. Ushma, and hear it. Et kol asher yomar Hashem Elokeinu. Ve'at tidaber eleinu, and you speak to us. What do you see? The account of this great event in the book of Dvarim, 40 years later almost, by Moshe Rabbeinu. My dear friends, this great event, witnessed by millions of men, women, and children. Millions. This event, if I ask you, hey, Noam, how are you feeling? Come on. Come into the Machon. You haven't studied Torah? No problem. Come in. You don't believe in prophecy? He sits down, we start studying. Let me ask you something. Did your grandfather ever tell you about great events that happened to him? Of course, my grandfather told me that he did this in Europe and he did that, and these great things happened here. And you believe your grandfather? He would never lie to me. He would never lie. And my father brought the accounts of what happened to him. So you trust your father and grandfather. Very nice. Very interesting. What happens if I tell you that accounts that have happened to millions of people 3,500 years ago have been carefully, when I use the word carefully, I repeat the word carefully, handed down. It's in the national memory. It's in the national soul. Every father was teaching his child, every teacher teaching his disciple, these events. Are you aware that the guardians of Torah are so careful when they're writing, scribing on the parchment, that even if one of 10,000 letters is missing, it makes it invalid. What? We're so careful. But maybe there's a different historical tradition in Morocco. No, they're the same thing. And maybe there's a different historical tradition in Hungary and Eastern. No, really? In Eastern Europe and in the Middle East and in Africa, over these thousands of years, we've all been handing down the same Torah, the same letters, and teaching our kids the same thing until 200 years ago, when there was a break in the tradition. The Enlightenment period enters into our world. Assimilation begins. People start a different type of way of life and culture, and they stop teaching their children Torah. And they make some amendments and changes called reformism, progressivism, and there's a break. People stop teaching their children Torah. And the grandchildren don't learn Torah either. That happened in Europe. Very much less happened in Africa and in the Middle East, to the Sephardi countries. So here, we're learning about what happened 3,500 years ago, handed down carefully, and prophets appeared in every generation. Do you know the multitudes of prophets that appeared? The Talmud says, walking the streets of Jerusalem were prophets like double the amount of people that came out of Egypt. Oh, is that true? Yes, Masechet Megillah, page 14, side 1. But what happened to them? Their messages were not recorded. Why not? Answer, they had no implication for future generations. What was recorded? Only those messages, those ideas, those events that have meaning, implication for future generations. So what we're learning here is the basics of what really Torah acceptance is about. We saw it. It was revealed to us. We heard the mixing of the senses. As Rabbi Yehuda Levi explains, also the Ibn Ezra in the Kuzari and Ibn Ezra on the Chumash. It says in the book of, at the end of the Ten Commandments in the next chapter, the nation is seeing the voices. They're seeing voices. They're hearing things that can be seen. That means the senses of man were blended together, mixed together. We could see what is heard and we can hear what is seen. That brought us to a metaphysical level. That we were able to hear this. And by the way, this is how God spoke to Adam HaRishon. And later to Noach. And later to Avram Avinu. So this nation has genes called the genes of prophets. We have the genes of prophecy. The fact that it's dormant for the last 2,000 years. Tell me, are you handy with your hands? I'll give you a screwdriver, power drill. You can build? Not so much. Why not so much? Huh? Anyone here have a father, grandfather that was very handy?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how about you?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, my kids were. My kids are.
There are many times it'll happen that there's a trait in someone's family, but it doesn't appear in the child. Sometimes it appears in the grandchildren or something. I can't build for anything. My kids, wow, they can build caravans, whatever. Okay? I can't do it for them to save my life. I don't think I held a screwdriver until I was 14 or 15 years old or something. Are you laughing at me again? Okay. I'll send strong people at you. Be careful, right? There are things that are dormant, not only in the physical character world, but also in the spiritual world. These spiritual genes of prophecy are asleep. Because Am Yisrael is not on the level that was on. When we made Aliyah For the Second Temple period, most of the Jews remained in Borough Park. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. They didn't go with their Persian carpets. They stayed in Iraq and Iran. They didn't want to make Aliyah. Only the few made the Aliyah. Most of the scholars remained abroad. That's not the divine presence. When more and more Jewish people come back to the land of Israel, there's a greater divine presence. A greater divine event. And that will have an impact on prophecy. Prophecy is a function of the Shekhinah, the divine presence. The Shekhinah is a function of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel. Settling the land of Israel. That is Shekhinah, that is divine presence. So in Temple period number 2, 5 things were missing in the Beit HaMikdash and prophecy. We're on a much lower level. But here we're understanding the vitality, the essence of this great event. And in the end, the nation began hearing, and they felt that they're going berserk. They cannot tolerate it. But from here it was clear. They believed that there is prophecy, and they believed that Moshe is a prophet. And as some of you know, Rambam, Maimonides, in all his major books, in the Guide to the Perplexed, in the Mishnah Torah, and in the 13 Principles of Faith, the Rambam classifies this as a major principle, that if we don't believe in prophecy, there's no Torah. We'll continue with this point another time, gentlemen.